one of my friends was like, well, what books are there out there? Can you go and like read some more? And so the first book I got was Women with Autism by Dr. Claire Jack. Hi, how you doing? Welcome back to my channel, Spoony Squared. I'm Becky, and today I'm going to talk to you about a book that has really been helping me since I got my autism diagnosis. When I was leading up to my diagnosis, it was like the assessment and getting the results was the end point. It was sort of like in my head, I felt like there were going to be answers, and I was kind of only focused on getting there. And then once I got my diagnosis, I was like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to be processed now. Like, what does this actually mean? What was the point in getting a diagnosis if it didn't really mean anything? And one of my friends was like, well, what books are there out there? Can you go and like read some more? And so the first book I got was Women with Autism by Dr. Claire Jack, who is a life coach and works with autistic women and is autistic herself. And it's a combination of her own experiences and the experiences of the women that she works with that have enabled her to be able to write this book, which I have found very, very helpful. Now today I'm just going to review the first part because I'm working through this book. So because Claire is a life coach, there's a lot of prompts throughout this book. There's a lot of things to work on. And it's not the kind of thing that you can just like pick up on a day and do every single exercise and then you've figured everything out about yourself and your life and autism and how it affects you and how, like I said, you can grow from there. So I have kind of read through this whole book, but now I'm going back and working through it. The first couple of chapters are actually really, really great pre-diagnosis. I think the first couple of chapters I'd already worked through a lot of the things that are in this book because they are about kind of the signs that you might have autism, how it might be showing up for you, and the steps that you can take, and whether a diagnosis is the right thing for you or not, how you can go about getting an assessment. And also, of course, it's called Women with Autism. So the ways in which it more frequently shows up for women, especially older women, and by older women I mean not girls, like later or adult diagnosis. There's some key things in here that I've talked about already, like being really prepared when you go for your diagnosis, and so doing a lot of reading this book will really help you if that's the stage that you're in. What I like about this is that, like I said, Claire is able to pull from her own experiences and experiences of others. So there was so much I recognised. And there's also, of course, things that you don't recognise as well, or things that maybe don't show up as much for you as they might do for other people. And by having her experiences and her clients' experiences as stories in this book or examples to help illustrate the things she's talking about, it can help make you make sense of what's going on for yourself through these illustrations and stories of other people's journeys. Where it got really, really helpful for me is once we got to chapter 5, which is, so I have autism, what now? And this is the point I was at post-diagnosis. It was like, what now? And there's many things to work through, and I've talked about this already in my videos. I'm only just scratching the surface, and I'm going to continue to be working through these things. I think I've already made a lot of progress, and it's been very, very helpful, and I'm done a lot of kind of looking back. So I guess initially that's also part of what it is in this book, to be able to look back and make sense of situations so that you can move forwards. The thing that really resonated with me the most when I first started reading this was this thinking that you were going to have this like relief by getting a diagnosis, but then getting all this other series of emotions related to it. Fear, regret about the past, kind of moving towards some kind of acceptance, which is, I think, is where I am now. It's like, it's almost, it was such a big thing, and now it's like, okay, well, this is just a thing that's integrated as part of me, and how do I move forward? Which I've kept saying today, how do I move forward? Which is very much the stage I am at. And of course, like, some of it is about struggling with a diagnosis as well, thinking that you previously have thought of yourself in one particular way, perhaps, or yeah, had an understanding of your identity and that changing, but of course also other people around you changing, maybe, or maybe some people didn't want you to get a diagnosis. That might make things more difficult. So it can also have an impact on your relationships. So reading through these things was really helpful, and getting again, like I said, the coaching prompts that are just about stopping and recognizing what the emotions are. And then we move on to the part that is really, really exciting for me, which is about living an authentic life. I'm going to do another video on unmasking and camouflaging, but this was a really good starting point to understand that, because I think understanding masking and camouflaging was certainly the thing that I found the most difficult, which is, now I've kind of worked through it, I think I have a better understanding. But again, that's with help of reading this book and using the prompts and examining my own life. And so this idea of like what it is to be the authentic you, and something that was going through my head when I first got diagnosed was, oh my gosh, I've always thought of myself as an authentic person, but now suddenly I'm realizing that I've been masking and camouflaging all along. Does that mean I'm inauthentic now? And what is the real me? And to some extent, yes, like there was some things that were hidden, but there was something really helpful in this book. Camouflaging also involves downplaying one's own feelings of distress. As revealed in one study, when girls mask their own feelings of unhappiness and anxiety in social situations in order to prevent their relationships from breaking down. This idea of downplaying feelings of distress is only something I recognize as I get later and later in life. I don't even know that this is about relationships. I think it's more to do with the fact that it's socialization. When women allowed, when women are on a pedestal, when women are focusing on their own needs and expressing that loudly, then that is something that is deemed to not be good. And I think what's happened for me in my life is I've really, or in fact, any kind of messaging I get, I take to heart until something proves to me that it's not right to live by this messaging. If it's coming from authority, or it's coming, I mean, in this case, it's kind of drip fed, isn't it, from every area of our lives. And I think that was just something like, no, you're a good girl, so you don't make a fuss. And there were times in my life where that fuss did come out. But actually, in terms of, that was more when it was to do with sort of something that felt like justice. But when it was just to do with my own pain, physical or emotional, I really downplay it. And this is where the camouflaging has come out for me more than anything else. And in the book, Claire talks about self-harm as a way, so she would cover up the emotions when she's in public, and then you go and you find different ways to self-harm or self-sabotage. And this, for me, and again, I'm not going to go into detail about this right now, the self-harm, I think, for me mostly came through an eating disorder, but the self-sabotage, it was that whole thing of oppressing my own needs, and then not making the right decisions for myself, and just kind of ending up therefore getting a bit bashed around in terms of, and never really making decisions, like letting circumstances make decisions for me, because otherwise I'd be too exposed. I wouldn't want people to see who the real me was. And this comes down to like so many tiny things, like music choices. That's still a really big source of shame for me. And these are things that this book is helping me to work through. So it's kind of like, I've always felt like I can be myself. There are environments where I'm myself, and then there are other places where I just am not at all myself. So this thing about like inauthenticity is true. Like there are aspects when I am authentic. I don't lie, and I think that's why I always felt like I was being authentic. But I do need to lean more and more heavily into what is an authentic life for me, and make the right decisions for me. The other thing that came up in this book is this idea of congruence with values and beliefs and ideals. And so that means like that the things, your actions reflect your values and your beliefs. And I think there's definitely been times in my life when that hasn't happened, or where I felt like I can't align my values and beliefs just out of survival. And for me, like a lot of my behavior comes out or a lot of this like masking behavior comes out in the workplace, because the workplace is where your livelihood comes from. And your workplace is the way you survive. Like that's, for me anyway, that's the ingrained beliefs that I have. You work for survival, and hopefully I work for more than that as well, but like my baseline survival relies on me being able to work, and relies on me having workplace relationships, and a number of situations embedded that belief into me. And it's and there's truth to that, obviously. Like, yeah, if you can't build good relationships in the workplace, then, and you can't perform at your job, then you don't have a job, you don't get paid. That's where my thoughts go, and there is reality to that. So they're not invalid thoughts, but they are overriding when the other thoughts could be, how do I use my strengths, my experiences, my talents, the way I see the world, my special interests, to build relationships, to create value in the world, to create value in the workplace. So it's like switching that mindset, and that's something that is talked about in this book as well. And I loved one of the questions in here, which was about what makes you feel fully alive. And that question just makes things really obvious for me. Like, oh yeah, I know exactly when I feel fully alive, when I'm giving my best. And there's a few different things, obviously, that are on that list. So I think I really love that question. I mean, take away one question from this video, from this book, maybe that's the one to take away. And of course, I should say, this applies to people who aren't autistic as well. So you don't have to be autistic to lean into the things that make you feel fully alive. The difference is that with autism, if we don't do these things, this is when we suffer burnout. This is when our mental health can be very severely affected. This is where, because of our spiky skills profiles, some of the communication and relational challenges, we may be like underperforming a really long way if we're not leaning into those things that are our skills and our strengths. And where I've got to at the moment in this book is really looking at the future self, and where do I see myself in living an authentic life in 5 years or 10 years. And that's, again, there's a really great exercise in this book, which actually I'd got from another coach first, which had nothing to do with autism again. So it's, but I'd already been doing this practice where I'd looked ahead, and it's like seeing yourself in the future, and what are you doing day to day? How are you feeling? What are the challenges you're facing then? What is the advice you'd give your current self from the future? Being able to kind of project yourself into that future, understand the steps you've taken to get to that point, which then sort of gives you an action plan if that's the point you want to get to. And then again, there's some other questions in here which I really loved in terms of doing this visualization. So what would you say, what opportunities do you say yes to in this future version of yourself? What opportunities have you said yes to? Will you say yes to? What do you say no to? How do you nurture yourself, your passions, your alone time? And again, my favorite, my favorite question in this exercise, maybe this is my favorite question in the whole video. What did you do, i.e. like what have you been doing up till now that you may have rejected because you thought it was too weird or self-indulgent? And I love that question, because doesn't that just like play into so many of the things that are going on? Like, we don't even consciously do it, I don't think. I don't consciously do it of like, I don't want to do that, that would be weird. In fact, in some ways I feel like I do that less than neurotypical people. I feel like that's something where I didn't fit in, because there's kind of this very neurotypical way of being like, oh, no, I wouldn't want to show off like that, or I wouldn't want to put my face in the camera, or I wouldn't want to, and all those things I would just be like, huh? Like, what are people talking about? There's nothing wrong with that. But it's almost like a subconscious thing, I've realized, where there's certain things I don't do because they will be seen to be weird. And I think that's more to just do with the size of which I do things, actually. So it's kind of getting out there, doing stuff bigger, like really leaning into certain things, saying no to other things, and creating that future version of yourself right now in the choices you're making and by embracing those things. And I think having a book to guide you through that has been really helpful for me. I mean, I love books. That's how I read. I mean, we can read online too, right? Yeah, but that's how I learn, and it's how I've always learned. That is part of my authentic self, reading to understand more about the world, because to me, reading is a kind of individual protected activity. It's a way to access the world without being overwhelmed by social stimuli. And so I love to read. And it's so having a book for me just helps me to kind of slow down and do these exercises and work towards that future self. I'd love to know what your future self looks like. And also, if you have any other book recommendations, I'm definitely got a few on my list already. Or if you'd like to know any of the recommendations that I have, then let me know. I'll go through a few more and maybe do a book recommendation video a little bit further down the line. And of course, like, subscribe, share this video with other people who you think might find it valuable. I really hope your journey is going well and that you are able to find ways to overcome the challenges and to find that beautiful version of you, that lovely, grounded, authentic self with all your weirdness, and the value that brings into the world. I'll see you soon. Bye.